Imagine waking up one day to find out that your private property, something you've owned for years, is suddenly being claimed by the HOA. Not just any part of your land, but your private road, the one you've maintained and controlled for decades. Now the new power-hungry HOA president says it's community property, and suddenly cars are tearing through your land, ruining your lawn, and causing chaos. You fight back, but the HOA won't listen until they make a critical mistake that backfires spectacularly. This is a real story of arrogance, legal battles, and ultimate revenge. Let's get into it. So for context, Albert, probably in his mid-50s, is this short, extremely overweight guy who somehow got elected by running unopposed after our previous president retired to Florida. From day one, he has been on an absolute power trip. I'm talking about sending out violation notices for grass being half an inch too tall, fining people for leaving their trash cans out 10 minutes past the designated time, and making up rules that are not even in the HOA bylaws. The real kicker, though, is this guy has been going around claiming that he is some kind of elite ex-military special forces operator. At every HOA meeting, which he now requires monthly attendance for, he manages to work in these absolutely ridiculous stories about his classified missions. I'm talking about tales that sound like they are straight out of a bad action movie. Last month's meeting was what finally pushed me over the edge. Picture this: we are all sitting in the community center, already 40 minutes into what should have been a 30-minute meeting, while Albert is standing at the podium in this ill-fitting tactical vest he started wearing to meetings. I wish I was joking, and that is when I had to make the call. He was saying, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a dramatic whisper. Either let the terrorist cell escape with the nuclear codes or take the shot. It was a two-shot through a sandstorm while hanging upside down from a helicopter. My neighbor Kay, who was sitting next to me, actually snorted out loud. I don't blame her. The guy is 5'5" and easily 350 pounds. He got winded earlier that week trying to move a weight bench at our community gym, which I personally watched him struggle with for 20 minutes before giving up. But here's where it gets interesting. Near the end of the meeting, my neighbor Ryland Knox showed up, still wearing his military stuff from work at the nearby base. Albert immediately stopped mid-sentence, stood up straight, and gave him the most awkward salute I've ever seen. Ryland, who I later learned is an E4, which apparently is not very high-ranking, actually laughed out loud. Dude, I'm just a specialist, and that's not even how you salute. The room got so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Albert's face turned bright red, but he quickly tried to cover by claiming that he was just being polite and that some of his saluting techniques were classified. After the meeting, I was talking with Ryland in the parking lot when Albert walked by, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Ryland shook his head and said, "Man, that guy's full of it. Half the stuff he's claiming would get you court-martialed just for talking about it if it was true or real." I thought that would be the end of it, but guess what showed up in my mailbox the next day? A violation notice for so-called improper trash receptacle placement with a $150 fine. Mind you, I have a security cam pointing at my driveway, and I know for a fact that my bins were brought in on time. That is when I decided enough was enough. I started doing some digging, and it turns out you can request military service records through something called a FOIA request. So then I also found out about the Stolen Valor Act, which makes it illegal to falsely claim military honors for personal gain. I spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. I recorded his stories at meetings, perfectly legal in our state with one-party consent, documented every time he used his alleged military service to intimidate residents, and collected statements from actual military members in our community about inconsistencies in his stories. The breaking point came at last week's meeting. Albert was in the middle of another tall tale about being held for ransom in an undisclosed foreign hellhole when I stood up. "Actually, Albert," I said, holding up a folder, "I have your military service records right here. Would you like to explain to everyone why there is no record of you ever serving in any branch of the military?" The room erupted. Albert tried to claim his records were classified, but I was prepared for that too. "Well, that's interesting," I continued, "because I also have statements from multiple military officials confirming that that is not how classification works. And according to the Stolen Valor Act of 2013, falsely claiming military service and honors for personal gain, like let's say getting elected as HOA president, is actually a federal crime. I then proceeded to lay out every inconsistency in his stories, backed up by statements from actual service members. The final nail in the coffin was when I played a compilation video of all his contradicting stories from previous meetings. Albert tried to maintain control of the room, but it was just too late. One of our board members immediately called for an emergency vote to remove him from his position. It passed unanimously, and the aftermath has been interesting. Albert resigned the next day, and all pending HOA violations under his leadership are being reviewed. Now, however, some neighbors are saying that I went too far, that I could have handled it privately instead of humiliating him in front of everyone, that exposing him so publicly was unnecessary and cruel. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for exposing more power-tripping HOA president as a stolen valor fraud in front of the entire neighborhood? And you guys let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think I went too far here? I think I went the absolute right way, and Albert deserved this. And then again, Albert was actually lucky because there could have easily been legal consequences for this as well, because stolen valor is really not something you want to mess with, especially in the United States. But then again, I'm not sure if any other country has a law like this. Comment number 1. Not the a-hole. Stolen valor is no joke. As someone who actually served, people like him make me sick. He was not just telling stories, he was using fake service claims to intimidate and control people. You did the right thing. Comment number 2. You are the a-hole. What a completely destroys someone's life over an HOA dispute. Yes, he was wrong to lie about military service, but you could have handled this through proper channels instead of orchestrating a public takedown. This kind of vigilante justice is what is wrong with society today. And yeah, guys, I'm not really sure that I really destroyed this man's life. He simply had it coming for himself. Comment number 3. Everyone sucks here. Obviously, lying about military service is wrong, but turning this into a public spectacle was unnecessary and cruel. You could have reported him to authorities or the HOA board privately. Instead, you chose to play judge, jury, and executioner in front of the whole neighborhood. And yeah, guys, now let's move on to the next homeowner association story. And by the way, if you have watched until here, I would very much appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for the support. This one is titled, HOA President Declared My Private Road as HOA Property. So I got a private road on my land, and I feel like I need to explain that before I can even start talking about the HOA and how they are involved. The first thing that I need to point out is that the road is not a valid street anymore. My house is extremely old and on a historic property. The actual roads for cars and everything were pretty much built around my land, as well as a few other ones. My road has not been used by the public probably since they were riding around with horse-drawn carriages. At the same time, I did not get rid of the road or neglect upkeep on it because of the history. I don't believe in erasing physical history just to bring things up to more modern times. I think some old things should be left as they are. And if used for anything, it can be teaching about when things were different. My family, for instance, has been in this town for a long time and lived on this exact piece of property. That's my own little history right there. And yes, I do use my own road because for me it provides a very convenient shortcut between two pretty main roads. It might seem weird for a house to be in between two main roads, but like I said, a lot of things got built around the old properties here. So the road is not a registered road with the state or anything, and it's fully within my own private property. I have signs up letting people know that it is a private road and not to use it. It's not a huge deal or anything, so most people either know about it or just respect and listen to the signs telling them not to enter and that they would be trespassing if they did. Now, I'm not some crazy guy ready to arrest people, and on occasion I'm sure people ignore the signs and go through anyway, but it's a pretty rare thing to happen. Now, not every home around here is historic and old. A lot of them are newer, and with them came people with a different kind of mindset on what makes a good community. I get that people have different opinions about things, and I don't give myself a headache trying to shift people's views towards my own, mainly because it is just not my business. So those people figured that an HOA would be the best thing for the area, and they all set one up, trying to get people involved, and all sorts of things. Set up like a neighborhood watch, which on paper sure is a good idea, but the crime rate is already next to nothing here, so it just feels like a waste of resources. It was about 15 years ago when the HOA got set up, and I was asked if I wanted to join. I told them that I was not interested, and that was pretty much all I heard from them until about a year ago. I guess the person in charge finally decided they had enough and stepped down from the position of running the HOA. The new guy that took over was not somebody who was a stranger to me. He was a pretty aggressive guy, and I don't mean in the physical way, he just came off as arrogant, and people that I knew seemed to want to stay away from him. He somehow had a lot of friends, or at least people who followed him since he came off with all this power. He came over to my house one day, and I did not even know it was about the HOA since it really could have been about anything. People borrow things and make sure people know if something major happens all the time. Even if I did not like him, I was still going to open the door for him. Me, hey there, what do you need? Jerry, I assume you heard by now that I'm in charge of the HOA. It was finalized this morning. Me, congratulations, I guess you're here to try and convert me into joining. Right? Just so you know I'm not interested if that saves you some time today. Jerry, that's not what I came by about. It's about the signs you put up by the road. I was confused at first, thinking he meant the actual road, and it took a moment for my brain to catch up to what he was talking about, my private road. Me, what is wrong with my signs? Jerry, I don't know where the old HOA let it go for so long, but I cannot keep letting you stop people from using a road anymore. Me, well, that road is on my property, so it's private because it's not a registered road. Jerry, well, you see, I had a meeting, and it's been decided that the road is now HOA community property. We cover maintenance and everything, but the signs need to go. I was pretty angry, but I was not going off the rails or anything. I just told him again, thinking he was confused about something and that the road was on my property, so he could not even control it. This is where his aggressive behavior came out, and he decided to get in my face when I had been calm. Jerry, you're getting one warning from me. Stop arguing and do what I tell you. It's a public road now, and that's all she wrote. He did have documents with him that looked pretty official, but I knew they couldn't be real, or he couldn't actually enforce anything. I did not take down my signs that day, but it didn't stop Jerry from taking them down himself and making it clear to everybody that it was now an HOA public road. People were now constantly using it as a cutoff between the two roads, and I had constant cars going between my property. It really was not meant to be a two-lane road either, but that did not stop the HOA from saying it was. Both ways were not fitting on the road because of this, and my lawn around the road became nothing but dirt and tire marks. Now I don't blame the drivers really because they were just going off what they heard. It's hard as one person to stop something that a bigger voice is saying is the right thing to do. I went through proper channels of sending the HOA certified letters which showed that it was on my property and not public space. I even put up signs that would work for a day before Jerry would take them down again. As mad as I was, Jerry seemed to be even angrier, threatening to send me fines, which I knew was not legal since I was not in the HOA. I did not know what else to do, so I contacted a lawyer who sent the HOA a cease and desist letter. He also told me to get cameras so I could document every single time Jerry came onto my property and took away my signs, along with showing all the unauthorized use of the road causing the wear and tear to my property. The HOA took that cease and desist letter and decided that they wanted to go to court and object to it, and by they I mean Jerry, with his aggressive attitude probably not letting anybody else stop him. I did not care if going to court meant that this thing would be over and settled with. Jerry came to court with one and only one argument to make. He claimed to the courts that the public has the right to use the road because he could prove that my land was historical and that people had historical usage rights for the road. Now, while historical usage rights might sound pretty serious to some of you, let me let you in on a little secret that is not a thing. Jerry made that up to sound smart and believed that lawyers and a judge would be tricked by something like that. Even being told it didn't exist did not stop Jerry from arguing for it and claiming that it should be a right. He started grasping at straws and saying that a road could not be private and everybody had to have equal rights to it. Then the judge told him something. With this being an unauthorized use by the government, if the HOA takes control over it, that means the responsibilities and liabilities fall onto you. If there is an accident on the road or car damage, the people can sue the HOA and will most likely win. Jerry, wait, but judge, that was of course, if the road was not already on private property, which it clearly is. Mr. OP has a right to keep people off of his property, and that includes the road. I am denying your argument against the cease and desist letter you've been given, along with a word of advice to heed it, lest you want to end up back in court paying more damages than I can only assume Mr. OP is taking you to civil court for. I just have to give a little shout out to that judge for being a great guy and putting Jerry in his place, something that needed to be done probably his entire life. I did also sue the HOA for damages to my property, as the road was worn, the land around it was torn up, and oil spills and such all over the place. With the video, I could even prove how many signs they took down and forced me to buy and put up again, so Jerry was also paying for all of those. Now that I'm writing it out, I kind of wonder what the store owner thought when I was buying new signs every week. I was still a little bit worried about the HOA, so I decided to invest in some high-quality remote control activated gate with a camera on it, all coming out of the HOA pocket as some of the damage and use of my property money they were forced to pay up. Jerry wasn't done getting his ass handed to him though, because the HOA was not happy about having their budget blown on a civil lawsuit. I learned later that they told him to leave my road alone, but he just pushed his power as the leader even further. He was forced to resign due to that, but also because they felt that he was a major liability and it was only a matter of time before he pulled another stunt. People could find him at the bar for weeks complaining and moaning about how I ruined his life because I just hated the HOA and everybody else. Nobody listens to the ramblings of a guy like Jerry unless it is to get a laugh at his expense. I do find it a little bit ironic that now I have the most modern-day protection for the oldest and most historical part of my property. It is that good kind of irony though, and the next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work as a bouncer doorman at a bar that charged a $2 cover on weekend nights. Everyone paid to get in, with only one exception: party buses. We had an agreement with the different party bus operators that if they brought their groups to our bar they would get in for free. Lively crowds are good for business. So one night I'm working and a guy comes in with his girlfriend and I tell him it's $2 a head. He grumbles about it and I give him the same line I tell anyone who complains: a $2 cover is the cheapest thing you will buy here tonight. If you cannot afford it, you might want to go somewhere else. He does not want to look cheap in front of his lady, so of course he pays. A couple of minutes later he is back saying that he just talked to some people who didn't have to pay and wants to know why he got singled out. Well, I can dead in but two bowls of poems. Winnie a bowls of poems. One dubba, well I can dead in thus. I tell him about the party bus rule and say those people must have come in on a bus. He motions towards some people sitting with his girlfriend and tells me, you did not charge my friends, and they didn't come on a bus. I recognized the people, and when they came in, I asked them if they were from the bus, and they had said yes. So basically they lied to me. It happens, and normally I wouldn't worry about it. I tell him, well, it sounds like I made a mistake. I guess it's their lucky night. That's my hint to him that he should let it go, but that's not good enough for him. He gets louder and keeps demanding that I refund his $4 to keep things fair. And well, by then I've had it with him. I tell him, you're right, it's not fair. Let me fix it for you. He smirks because he thinks he's getting a refund, but he doesn't realize that all I'm giving is some sweet malicious compliance. His smirk disappeared when I stepped away from the cash drawer and walked over to where his friends were sitting. In my most polite voice I said, hey, sorry to bother you guys, but there's a $2 cover tonight, and your friend here told me that you didn't pay. I must have misheard you when I asked if you were with the party bus, but I need to collect the cover from you now." The looks of betrayal they gave him were priceless. I collected their covers, smiled, and loudly thanked him for being so honest. Then I walked back to my post and watched them proceed to rip him a new one. And the next one is an "Am I the a-hole" story. So there's this guy at my work, James, who makes derogatory jokes about his wife anytime his spouse comes up in conversation. He will make one of those "Oh, my wife is such a nag, the old ball and chain woman, huh?" jokes. He will always say it with a big grin and then laugh, but he does it constantly. And when I say constantly, I mean constantly. In the 3 years I've worked with James, I've only heard him mention his wife without making a joke along those lines, maybe 3 or 4 times. It really gets on my nerves to hear him talk trash about her all the time. Today another coworker of ours said that he was making plans for his anniversary with his wife, and James butted in and said, "Oh yeah, mine's coming up soon too. I guess I need to do something or I will never hear the end of it." And I kind of lost my temper and asked him, "If that's the way you feel, why are you still married to her?" James kind of sputtered a bit that he was joking, and I told him that he always talks about being married like it's a burden, and that there comes a point when even the funniest jokes get old, and that his jokes about his wife have not ever been funny. It kind of went on to an awkward silence until James left for the day. So some of my coworkers are glad that I called him out on it, and some of them think what I said went too far. So Reddit, am I the a-hole here? Should I apologize to James tomorrow? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Should I apologize, and am I the a-hole or not? Comment number 1, not the a-hole. By him sputtering and not having a quick comeback, you hopefully gave him something to think about. Perhaps he will drop constantly making jokes altogether, or at least not do it in front of you because he knows how you feel. Don't apologize, you did the right thing. Comment number 2, not the a-hole at all. The "I hate my wife" stick is so old and played out just in a comedic sense in the first place, but a lot of it is just misogynistic BS. Men never get called out, and maybe she nagged you after the 30th or 300th time you ignored her and made her do emotional labor. I absolutely hate this, and I would have said the same thing. If you hate this woman so much, then just leave. She probably doesn't know he is saying this stuff at work. How would she? It's not funny. It never was funny. He is sharing as a douchebag, and he got called out on it. Comment number 3, not the a-hole. It's totally inappropriate of him to constantly make those types of jokes. Why would anyone in their right mind want to constantly make fun of and degrade their spouse? You should have asked him if he would make those jokes in front of his wife. Anyway, the next one is another revenge story. I used to manage a catering company for my boss while he was undergoing chemotherapy. This is one of my first gigs where I was in charge. The bride calls me at 1 o'clock in the afternoon the day before the wedding and decides she wanted a cheaper menu. She and her husband already paid for almost everything, and it's far too late to change anything, I told her. But she started throwing a fit, saying that she wants to change the steak to chicken and demanded we either serve chicken or charge the price of the chicken, and she'll not be paying for anything extra. I informed her that according to the contract, she is to receive 150 steak lunches at a price of $50 per plate, and it also states that she cannot change the menu unless she does it at least a month before the wedding. When she hears this, she flips the hell out and starts screaming at me, calling me illiterate and telling me her fiancé is a lawyer and they will sue me. She handed the phone over to her fiancé, and he also started screaming at me, saying it's his damn wedding and he can have whatever he wants. They end up firing me at the moment, and I informed them that the cancellation fee is 90% of the cost of catering, which I was already paid for. They start screaming at me, telling me that I ain't crap and they cannot get anyone to cater for them, and they are going to make me pay for this. They end up hanging up on me, thank God, and I had an inkling that I should probably keep making the food in case they call tomorrow and they want us to cater. So we finish cooking, and the next day at 7 a.m., I get a call from the groom, and he demands that I come down there to cater the wedding, or they're going to sue me for not providing service. I calmly tell the guy that they terminated the contract yesterday, and as per the termination clause on the contract, we are entitled to keep 90% of the entire cost of catering. He is raging. He didn't say anything, but I can feel how mad he is over the phone. After a moment of awkward silence, I inform him that if he would like us to cater the event, he has to do same-day catering, which is 3 times the original price I charged him. Also, he has to pay all fees in advance, and the food depends on what we have available and ready, and we also reserve the right to refuse service. He gets really pissed off at this point, telling us this is extortion. He already paid for food, so he didn't have to pay again. I informed him again of the termination clause and also informed him that the food was for a previous contract and that contract had ended and he would have to pay for it again. He ended up starting a new contract with us for 3 times the original price. He tried to change the menu again just to spite me, but I then made sure that he knew I reserved the right to refuse service. He and his bridezilla kept everything the same down to the baby carrots, and of course the steak, all while paying me 3 times the original price. If they had just stuck with the original contract, as soon as we got to the venue before I got anything out, I made the bride and groom sign the new contract and pay me completely in advance. $22K, and left to deposit the money. While I was gone, they harassed my caterers and threatened someone with deportation, even though they were legal. He tried to sue us later, and the judge heard the recorded phone call, saw the contract, and told him to pay my legal fees. I looked them up on Facebook recently, and apparently, they are divorced now. It's only been 3 years, and the next one is a malicious compliance story. And by the way, if you have watched until here, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the video, and maybe even leave a comment if you really want to support me. Thank you so much. A few years ago, when my kids were 3 and 7, we were looking for a new car for my wife. After scouring Auto Trader, we are in the UK, we saw a Mazda 6, decent mind, made a couple of owners in a small traders down south. It was about an hour away, so we hopped in my car and went to look at it. We arrived at a site which had some decent-looking cars, and it was a nice and tidy place, so it didn't ring any alarm bells. We were greeted by one of 2 Romanian brothers who seemed knowledgeable and pretty free of the hard sell. I had a look around the car, very little rust, oil looked clean, tidy inside, with not too much wear. The only 2 things I found were the head unit panel, which was not in place correctly, and one of the brackets by the engine had a bit of a dent in it, but it was a non-functional bracket, and it didn't appear to have a crack, so it was okay. I took it for a test drive, and it was okay. My wife liked it, so we paid part cash, part card. A few days later, after sorting the insurance, we went and collected it. By the time we got home, my wife got out and immediately said, "There's something wrong with this car." I took it for a drive, and yes, it had low power, sounded terrible, and didn't feel safe.